There's one thing that every new Football Manager player wants to know. That thing is, how in the world do I win? Or more specifically, how do I win when I have no money? So the topic for today's video kind of comes from RPG gaming. This is an idea that's called min-maxing. In short, you take advantage of stats that help you the most in the game and you ignore the stats that don't really help you very much. Now, it might not be an exact fit to Football Manager, but this concept is pretty close. As you probably already know, some really smart people have tested every conceivable attribute in Football Manager to see which ones are the most powerful. It turns out that pace and acceleration are more important than any other attribute. Well, this is actually really a groundbreaking discovery, even though a lot of experienced Football Manager players don't want to admit it for whatever reason. Now, some of us spent months searching on the internet and in other places to figure out what kind of players we were supposed to sign back when we started playing the game like a couple years back. You know, we were looking up things like what positions need fast players, what positions need technical players, and so on. And in the end, it turns out that all you need for every single position is speed. It also turns out that there's a way to maximize pace and acceleration in your training, but it's not what you think it is. Yeah, well, for years we've been focusing on the wrong thing. We thought that you actually had to do something with Football Manager training, and it turns out that the best training is to do nothing at all. Well, the idea here is simple. This is the training schedule. Just use rest for every single slot. I'm dead serious about this, by the way. I tested this out over several seasons, and it works. Even if your club is awful, even if your club has really bad training facilities, it still works. In fact, it works amazingly well with young players, and it will even help older players become faster. And again, you do nothing. You want the players only to rest during training. Now, you go to the rest screen in training. You want everything set to double intensity for players with a full hard or almost a full hard. For anything below that, give them no pitch or gym work. Finally, set the individual training for every single player to quickness. Yeah, it's not really much fun if you have to do this for every single player, if you have to go in and right-click and do it over and over again. Usually you can select a ton of them or even the whole team right at once. You can right-click one time and get them all taken care of. But sometimes the game will randomly not let you do that, and I don't know why. Now, the craziest thing about this strategy is that it actually works. Your players will grow faster.
Special! That is a special goal!
When you think about it, you're basically telling your players to sit in your training facilities and meditate about quickness. Meditate with double intensity, that is. But this really works, and I will show you. So to test this, I set up a test save using the World Super League mod. I created a low reputation and low finances version of the North Korean team Lee Myung-soo. I know you've never heard of the team before, and that was kind of the point. So the idea I had here was to take the biggest challenge that I could think of and see if my players could develop using this strategy. And so I didn't allow myself to make any transfers, and I focused instead solely on developing my young players no matter how bad they were. And we were bad. Oh man, we were bad. For the 6 seasons I played, just about every single match started off with an email like this. We were always the underdogs. But we still managed to get a few wins every now and then. But you know, how well we did really isn't important. What I want to show you is how well this training system worked. Okay, let's take a look at this guy, Choi Jin-hyuk. This is what he looked like at the start of the save. He was 15 years old, he could play as a right winger, was pretty slow, but had some good attributes elsewhere. By 2029, this is what he looked like. His acceleration and pace both rose by 5 points. Now, if you go back and you compare all of that, you'll see that his technical attributes actually fell. In other words, if I understand this right, the game basically took numbers away from his technical attributes and added them to his physical attributes. So here's a better player. This is Choi Kwang-myung. He actually started off pretty fast. He had an acceleration of 13 and a pace of 11. By 2029, his ability to do anything technical had fallen, aside from penalty taking. But his acceleration was now 16 and his pace was 17. Here's Kim Jong-hyuk, who started off really slowly, 5 for acceleration and 4 for pace. By 2029, he had a 12 for acceleration and a 13 for pace, a really impressive improvement for a player who really wasn't that good otherwise. Even his jumping reach had increased. And here's Lee Myung-nam, who started off with a 4 for acceleration and a 3 for pace. Lee Myung-nam wound up with an 11 for acceleration and a 10 for pace, another pretty impressive improvement for a guy who really wasn't much of a player. You can even see this pattern in goal. Kim Chol-sung started out with a 10 for acceleration and a 7 for pace. By the end, he had a 15 for acceleration and a 13 for pace. Now, I'm not sure that pace and acceleration actually help that much for goalkeepers, but it's interesting to see that this kind of growth in physical attributes, and it's especially interesting to note that his goalkeeping attributes didn't really sink that much. So the big question, though, of course, is why does it work like this? Well, my theory is that the game is doing two things. It's taking potential ability and sticking it into pace and acceleration, and then it's taking some of the existing current ability and sticking that into pace and acceleration as well. And as you can see from these screenshots from FM Arena, I'm not the only one who has seen these kind of results. Well, there's a problem. While pace and acceleration are the best overall attributes for outfield players, they're technically not everything. This is why there are people on FM Arena who recommend using a different strategy after the players have hit age 18. Basically, when the players are young, make them do the all rest method, or all recovery, both of them work. Do the double intensity trick and make their additional focus quickness. This is the intensive meditation method. And then, once you've pumped up their pace and acceleration to level 16 or so, change over to all recovery, except with one quickness or physical training session, one attacking, and one match practice. So in theory, what this does is it helps you develop players who are better rounded. You see, even though you really want to maximize pace and acceleration, you can still achieve 20 pace and 20 acceleration for all of your outfield players without destroying their other attributes. In other words, you can have your cake and eat it too. Anyway, so how did we do with Lee Myung-soo? Well, not so well. We never made it out of the bottom of the table no matter how fast we were. Part of the problem is that some of our best players wound up with long injuries that forced us to play kids who hadn't been through the pace and acceleration training trick quite yet. The other problem was that our best offensive player set a new record for the most disciplinary problems, and he set that in only half a season. High aggression is not a good thing. Now, the other problem we had is that we kept losing good young players, and that's because the reputation of our team was way too low. Our best players refused to sign new contracts with us because I set our team's reputation way too low at the start. Now, it's crazy. These guys would leave our club, wind up not being signed by any other club, and would then just retire at like age 19 or something. Well, after a while, that player cycle became too much for me to deal with, and so I abandoned the save. It's time for another project though, and I've got some ideas, so stay tuned and we've got a lot more videos coming.